Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance keeps proving that he is a gaffe machine and underscoring why some people in Trump world are not happy with him, to say the least. Here's what Vance just said about the economy. Watch.
If the path to prosperity was flooding your nation with low-wage immigrants, then Springfield, Ohio would be the most prosperous country and the most prosperous city in the world. America would be the most prosperous country in the world because Kamala Harris has flooded the country with 25 million legal aliens.
Earlier today, I saw that J.D. Vance went on TV and said that if immigration were part of how countries become prosperous, then, quote, America would be the most prosperous country in the world, which makes me wonder, what country does J.D. Vance think is the most prosperous country in the world, since he doesn't think it's America? And also, does he really think that immigration has nothing to do with American prosperity? Most Americans disagree. By the way, most Americans also disagree with Donald Trump's decision to kill the bipartisan border bill that Kamala Harris has pledged that she would sign if it came to her. So rather than have us talking about that, he wants us talking about people allegedly eating cats.
So a couple of things there. First of all, Pete Buttigieg is he's phenomenal on TV. He's just sort of great. And he's perhaps one of the best advocates that the Harris-Walz campaign has. Secondly, in any other campaign, if the president or vice presidential candidate had said, as J.D. Vance did, that we do not have the largest, the biggest, the most successful economy in the world, that would have been front page news for days. And that candidate would have gotten hammered. And J.D. Vance is getting hammered now, but the fact this isn't a bigger story underscores just how much of a problem Donald Trump is at the top of the ticket. Let's be clear. The U.S. economy remains the biggest in the world. The U.S. economy has had the best growth since COVID, since the pandemic. The United States, in the first 3.5 years of the Biden-Harris administration, created more than 17 million new jobs. By comparison, Donald Trump, in the first 3 years of his administration before the pandemic, created 6.8 million. The stock market has gone up under President Biden, Kamala Harris by 40%. If you have a 401k or anything in the market, you are thrilled with the U.S. economy. The stock market has gone over 41,000. I mean, the markets are terrific. Inflation has finally dropped. Gross domestic product is up. Unemployment remains low. So by most measures, with the exception of inflation, the U.S. economy is doing really well. Now, for J.D. Vance to suggest that if immigration were the key to the economy, we'd be, first of all, one of the reasons that economists say that the United States is doing so well is because of all the labor that has entered the workforce over the last 5 to 10 years. Some people credit immigration, the number of people who are coming in to do relative unskilled labor, with a reason that the U.S. economy is doing so well, and that there are people to fill the jobs that are being created in agriculture and manufacturing, and also some of the jobs that a lot of Americans, frankly, don't want to do. So immigration gets some of the credit. It's why when you hear that the United States birth rate is declining, economists fear that because you need a certain number of people in the population in order to sustain the economy and keep it growing. Well, the U.S. is adding to the population through immigration. So you can say everything you want about immigrants, and you can disparage them, as Donald Trump and J.D. Vance do. And yes, they want to complain about the stress on infrastructure, and J.D. Vance wants to complain that they're bringing, unfounded, he's saying they're bringing in drugs and disease, and Donald Trump says crime. That is racism. A lot of it is not true. And what is true is that the immigration to the United States is being credited by economists across the spectrum with helping to grow the U.S. economy. And the U.S. economy is the most successful and the strongest in the world. And for J.D. Vance not to know that is shocking. This is just the latest gaffe that J.D. Vance has had just in the past week. J.D. Vance was asked about the Taylor Swift endorsement of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
Look, we admire Taylor Swift's music, but I don't think most Americans, whether they like her music or fans of hers or not, are going to be influenced by a billionaire celebrity who I think is fundamentally disconnected from the interests and the problems of most Americans. Look,
that sounds like he's talking about Donald Trump, a billionaire celebrity who's out of touch, who most Americans probably can't relate to. For J.D. Vance to disparage, I mean, you can say, hey, I don't think Americans are going to listen to a musician or a pop star or whatever, but to simply call her a billionaire celebrity that is out of touch, J.D. Vance is undermining and undercutting Donald Trump. There was J.D. Vance, of course, when on the cats and dogs, despite when it had been proven, when the mayor and city officials had said this is not true, J.D. Vance said, well, it might be true. The evidence might end up proving that it is true. That reminds me of, remember Vice President Dick Cheney in the run-up to the war in Iraq when there was, allegations of weapons of mass destruction, and there was no concrete evidence. There was some indication, some anecdotal. And Dick Cheney said, well, we can't allow the proof to be in the form of a mushroom cloud. And Dick Cheney cherry-picked intelligence and cherry-picked information to make the case that we needed to go to war with Iraq because Cheney claimed they had weapons of mass destruction and because Cheney suggested that they were tied into 9/11. So we went into war with Iraq. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Iraq was not connected to 9/11, and yet 4,000 U.S. soldiers were killed. More than 30,000 U.S. soldiers were injured in the war in Iraq, and the United States had to spend $2 trillion because Vice President Cheney cherry-picked information that he wanted and refused to acknowledge the truth. And here we have another vice presidential candidate who says, well, the information might be true. Put aside the ridiculousness of people eating cats and dogs. If that is your approach to an argument, well, the information might be true. It might turn out to support our narrative. That is dangerous. That is how Americans get killed. That is how America wastes trillions of dollars. We cannot go down that path again. There has to be some value to empirical truth. And if you're a presidential candidate or a vice presidential candidate who ignores empirical truth, who ignores reality, and we want that in the White House? No, I don't think so. As for the Democratic vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz, he took what happened at the Trump-Harris debate and he leveraged it in brutal fashion in ridiculing Donald Trump. Watch this.
Kamala Harris was able to, within a matter of a few seconds, use this guy's inflated ego and narcissism to bait him into melting down on a national stage in front of 60 million. You don't think Vladimir Putin could do that? You don't think Xi Jinping could do that? You don't think that folks who are looking to flatter this guy as he shakes down our allies like it's some type of racket operation, rather than standing with our allies?
What's so interesting about that, to say that Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, the world's dictators are going to play Donald Trump because Kamala Harris was able to play him at the debate. It goes in an interesting Democratic strategy, and that is one of Donald Trump's strengths. One of his advantages has been the perception that he is strong, that he is sort of authoritarian, that he's powerful. Some people really like that. Well, part of the challenge in a campaign is to sometimes take a strength or a positive that the other side has and flip it against them. And that's what Tim Walz is doing right there. He's saying the problem with Donald Trump is that, no, he's not strong. He's actually easily manipulated. And he may project this image of being strong, but if Kamala Harris can manipulate him and bait him so easily at the debate and get Donald Trump to say nonsense, well, imagine what Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping or some of the strong men and women of the world will be able to do to Donald Trump by flattering Donald Trump or by getting under his skin, by manipulating Donald Trump. And that's not a position the United States wants to be in. It is a smart political strategy by Tim Walz to take this perceived advantage of Donald Trump on strength and point out that, no, it's actually a weakness. And this is the sort of thing, sometimes these arguments get lost in the broader political debate over the economy and women's rights and immigration and everything else that are the big issues. But when you look at personal characteristics and you look at trying to sort of flip a perceived strength of one candidate or the other, it can sometimes make a difference even in a minuscule fashion, and in a minuscule fashion in battleground states, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia. Even if just a few people say, no, wait a second, that's an interesting point. Maybe maybe there's a disadvantage with Donald Trump. Maybe Donald Trump's emotions, who a lot of people like, are a weakness of him. If some people are now second guessing Donald Trump's strength, and they decide to, maybe they were leaning Donald Trump, but now they're undecided, or maybe they're leaning to Kamala Harris, that's a win for the Democrats. And it's smart political strategy by the Democrats to sort of go in that direction. And again, we've said it over and over. Keep in mind, this race is going to be decided by tens of thousands of votes in the key battleground states, mostly independent, undecided voters. The polls show that about 15% of the US electorate right now is undecided. What we've seen in the polling over the last several weeks is that the people who are leaning Donald Trump, a significant number of them are moving to undecided. A significant number of undecideds have been moving into lean Kamala Harris. You're not seeing people who are leaning Kamala Harris shifting back towards undecided or towards Donald Trump. And so when people talk about the polling window having changed, yes, there's still a lot of possibility of things going one direction or the other, but the number of people who are undecided, independent voters, voters who are only now paying attention, that window keeps getting smaller and smaller by the day, and the window essentially keeps being framed a little bit closer to the Democrats. So every time they are able to take a Trump supporter and peel them away from Donald Trump, or take somebody who's leaning to Donald Trump because of his strength, and you hear Tim Walz say, no, he's not strong, he's weak, that matters, and it is significant.